Today's talk is titled A Compassionate Response on Gender Identities. And I am basing this talk on this book by His Holiness Karmapa titled The Heart is Noble. And so in this book earlier, he talks about a fabricated self. And this is the same self that doesn't exist, the interdependent self. But the way he describes it as fabricated, I like, because it gives you might say, a different perspective. And the first thing about fabricate is it has different meanings. And one of them is to put together from parts. And it's definitely our self. I've talked about the 5 skandhas in the past, that this idea of a permanent, solid, real self that is unique is put together from parts. And when we examine the parts, we find that they are just made out of smaller parts and on and on and on and on. And it's all interrelated, interdependent, and there's nothing solid there. So it is fabricated in that sense. But another meaning of a fabrication, which I also like, is to lie, like fabricate evidence in a trial, a criminal trial, or to fabricate a lie. And so this fabricated self is that way. Who we are comes from partially the culture that we live in, partially our parents, partially our friends, partially karma from past lives, and all kinds of other different sources. But our identity is basically fabricated, who we think we are. And so Karmapa says that the categories of masculine and feminine, quote, have no objective reality, because gender is a concept. It is a product of our mind and has no absolute existence that is separate from the mind that conceives of it. So this is a very important point right from the beginning of the chapter in the book about gender identities. He says that these identities are totally fabricated and have no absolute existence, no absolute reality, that they are not, as some people might think, totally related to the physical body. He does not go into this, but now the Olympics is going on right now. And there has been a lot of, shall we say, debate and controversy over who is a woman and who is a man. And it seems like much of it has to do with women rather than men, how much testosterone they can have in their body, and on and on and on and on and on. You can do genetic analysis and so on down the line. So On the other hand, culture, and this can go right down to our parents, ourselves, our friends, um, puts us into boxes as being male or female, feminine or masculine. And there's a lot of social pressure to conform. Advertising, for instance, is incredible. How it stresses the differences. But in employment, these are important differences. Women generally are not paid as well as men for the same job. Even within family, frequently tasks are divided up according to the gender roles. And there are masculine and feminine qualities that exist within a culture. Now, these limit people. You might say they put everybody into boxes, including ourselves. And it's unnecessary. Karmapa says that I connect to people through his heart. Maybe I should say, to get my pronouns correct here, Karmapa says he connects with people through his heart and not through categories. And that it's best to avoid having to be masculine or feminine all the time for himself and for everybody else. That being tender and caring is important, and speaking from your heart rather than through categories is very important. Traditionally, in Tibetan Buddhism at least, wisdom is conceptualized as feminine, a feminine quality, and skillful means is the quality of being good at finding ways to accomplish your objectives, and that is conceptualized as male. And there is this union of skillful means and wisdom in Buddhism, frequently depicted by a male and a female deity as one rather than as two separate deities, as being inseparable. So the skillful means, the masculine, and the wisdom, the feminine, should be integrated and unified in each individual. Enlightenment can't be achieved without this union of both. And he talks about this being present in lots of other spiritual traditions, that there is the yin and yang in Taoism, in the Native American spirituality, there is Mother Earth and Father Sky, and so forth. So it's absurd to ridicule people for having both masculine and feminine qualities. That our gender identities are fluid, and there's good reason to be fluid. To, if you're a man, allow yourself to cry, for instance. And if you're a woman, to not be passive all the time. So it's unbalanced if you are only masculine or if you are only feminine. And so this is a very, very important point about this, that we need a mix, and that sometimes we need to have our masculine qualities be dominant, and sometimes we need our feminine qualities to be dominant. Now, even speaking of culture and the cultural overlay on sexual identities, that even cultures are changing over time, and that from culture to culture, there is significant differences. Again, this is an indication that all of this is fluid. When we look at what's happening right now in the 21st century, 2021, what we need is peace, harmony, a compassionate outlook, and a loving care. Now, this book, I think the teachings from it were given around 2011. Here's another quote. What we need now is not the ability to make assertions, but the ability to listen. And when I read that and thought about what's going on in this country and the world right now, this could never be more appropriate. That there are so many people that think that they are absolutely right. They know the truth, and everybody that doesn't believe what they believe or think what they think is the truth is wrong. So what's important right now is the ability to listen. He also feels that the present time requires a more feminine era, that women are making a greater contribution to society, and these feminine qualities of wisdom, listening, being sensitive at a heart level are really very, very important. He says that the age of the hunter is over with, that we need to look at others with the loving and kind eyes of a mother, not the quote hostile eyes of a warrior in battle. And he talks about this a little later on here. Maybe I could jump ahead to that part of the talk. That Karmapa talks about, he came from the area in Tibet that is called Kham, Kham. And there, the Tibetans in general looked at the Khampas, that being a person who came from Kham, as being like hillbillies are viewed in the United States. That they were primitive, backward, violent, and so forth. And the way he describes them reminded me a bit of the way John Wayne was portrayed in movies that I saw when I was a younger man. That they were aggressive, violent, would take revenge and attack. And these are Buddhists that he's talking about. And He says, of course, that this is just totally uncalled for today, that instead of avoiding being open and trusting, we need to be open and trusting. That being this way, that is being aggressive, violent, taking revenge, more than willing to attack others verbally or otherwise, that this hurts men as well as women. It hurts everybody. And again, to what I have been seeing lately in this country, this seems to be an epidemic that some of these videos of people that don't want to wear a mask or that are going to a public meeting and so forth, that you see the women screaming and angry and attacking in ways that I never would have conceived of when I was a young person back in the 50s and 60s and so forth. That it is just, to me anyway, very surprising how things have gotten in this country today. Now, to change here a little bit, that he talks about now then women's rights. And he says that women's rights are human rights. That this is another way that we need to change our attitudes about gender and the place of women and men. What he says also is very, very applicable to rights of minorities, whether it be racial minorities or ethnic minorities. That again, all these categories are totally fabricated. They're totally conceptual. It has nothing to do with the color of a person's skin, where you were born, the shape of your eyes, and so on and so forth. And all of us are human. And as a result, all of us have human rights. And this is not taking something from one group and giving it to another, as it is frequently portrayed today, that if we give a minority, let's say African Americans, rights equal to that of whites, then we have to give up our white privilege or whatever. And it's not about that. It's not a zero-sum game. And for you that are not familiar with a zero-sum game, and it is very simply that it is seeing the world this way. There is a finite amount of resources or of whatever it is that is desirable. And if one group is above the other group, then to make things equal, you have to take as much from this group and give it to the lower group until it balances on like a scale, like the scale that the statue of justice at the Supreme Court holds. And this is a common way of thinking, but it is not that way. It is about elevating the one group to that of the other, giving that group, in this case, women, the same rights, the same status and so forth that men have. And in Buddhism, there is absolutely nothing wrong with being in a male body and being attached or attracted to other people in a male body, or the same with being in a female body and attracted to somebody in a female body, or even having surgery done so that your male body becomes a female body. That none of this is a problem or considered bad. And so equal rights includes no matter what your sexual identity is and who you are attracted to, you are equal to everybody else. We are equal in that we all have a human body. And as humans, or even as sentient beings, we want to be happy and we want to avoid suffering. So it can actually get pretty bizarre if you listen to the news at all. And I'm talking here primarily about race. But again, the same thing is with feminine and masculine. Lately, a lot of issues have been about, again, going back to the Olympics, one of the team sports, the women had to wear bikini bottoms and the men could wear much, shall we say, more modest clothing on their around their waist. They wore, I think, shorts or even had something with legs on it. And this goes into the category of the Karmapa talking about the particular suffering of women that traditionally men seem to want to have a lot of say about how women treat their bodies. And you can go to other parts of the world. Karmapa says that, I think he was talking about India, Nepal, that women are not even treated as being fully human. You have men, and even in Tibet traditionally, this was present, that men were up here and women were down here. Men were superior. The Karmapa even has done things to educate monks in particular, but men in general, about the equality of women and men. And I remember Khenpo Tenkyong mentioning to me once that he had set up a talk with monks about nuns and women in particular, and talking about how they are equal to men and worthy of equal respect and so on and so forth. And he kind of laughed as he told me this, that one monk said, how can they be as intelligent as men? Their heads are smaller, their brains are smaller. You know, this is a situation that exists. Again, in this country, there are definitely men that feel this way, and there might be women that feel too that they are inferior to men. But women's rights have to do with respecting the value of human life and freedom. That kind of sums it up in a nutshell. And Karmapa points out about laws that yes, you can have laws that protect women, but even though there are lots of laws in this country about rape, that rape is common in the United States. So laws are not enough, that the change must come from within, that attitudes need to change, that we can't legislate a change in thinking. And this is why the book, The Heart is Noble, the subtitle is Changing the World from the Inside Out, that we are the ones that can help make these changes. The Karmapa has, for years, been working on elevating the status of nuns and also developing full ordination for nuns in Tibetan Buddhism. This is a tradition that I believe has never been present in Tibetan Buddhism. I'm not sure exactly where things stand right now, but he has been working very hard. And it's been very difficult because, again, of cultural predispositions, let's put it that way. And here is just a little personal commentary. Uh, my father was in a supervisory position at a large corporation in the, I think this was the late 60s. And he told me that they had meetings and on the topic of how can we get qualified people, but not pay them as much as the going, you might say, price would be. And so they decided to start hiring women because they could get very qualified women and pay them much less than men. And this is kind of a good news, bad news story. The bad news was, of course, that women were paid less and looked down on as opposed to men. But the good news is that jobs opened up to women, at least in that corporation, that were not there before. So it was the start. I guess what I'm pointing out is change comes little by little by little by decisions that people make. And over time, they make a difference. So the changes that need to be made are socially, because again, these are all constructed, fabricated identities. He tells a story that I had never heard before, and he just talks about it very briefly. But as growing up in a Christian country, you're probably familiar with the Garden of Eden story, how God created man and then from man created women or Eve. Hence, men were superior to women, Adam and Eve. And I did not know that there was a creation story about, or maybe quote unquote, a creation story in Tibetan Buddhism about humans. But this is what Karmapa said, is that in this myth that the first humans had no gender or sex, that everybody was equal biologically and socially. And as humans consumed more and more of the earth resources, they became more and more arrogant and arrogant. And then they started to eat a fruit, and he doesn't name what this fruit was, but it was a fruit that produced a new fruit very quickly after it was picked. So in other words, it was a great food to eat in terms of taste and so forth. And it was readily abundant. You could never run out of it. And everybody ate this. And it had the effect of causing the people that eat it to develop distinct organs, sexual organs. And so as a result of this, the different sexes, male and female, developed. Karmapa takes this story to mean that humans, being human is first and on top, and being different sexes is second and lower than being human. So, quote, if you want to divide society into categories based on physical differences, you can find a basis for doing so. But there is no requirement that we make such divisions. End quote. Maybe I'll repeat that last part. There is no requirement that we make such divisions. I, again, remember back in the 60s and 70s when men started wearing long hair. And this upset a lot of people, shall we say, people that were more traditional. There was a real cultural separation. I guess in simple terms, the hippies and everybody else. But personally, I think one of the problems that people had that upset them the most about a man wearing long hair is they couldn't tell at first whether it was a man or a woman. I read one time that, this is just on social media, that back then the men had better hair than the women in some cases. And I'm saying that with a smile on my face. So anyway, it's a serious mistake to put too much importance on our bodies, that whether it be our sexual aspect of our bodies or any other part of our bodies, that we're making what is physical and temporary a source of gratification, and it won't will not bring happiness. It won't bring contentment. Again, what comes to mind is the Kardashians, and social influencers who wear makeup to the nth degree, and who knows how much surgery they've had to improve their body. That this is actually very, very harmful, that our culture and we place too much importance on our bodies. That are these gender ideals, quote unquote, give our body too much of a importance in our lives and in our identities. That uh, quote, if we are looking to our bodies as a source of happiness or to tell us something meaningful about who we are, we have already entered into a completely unrealistic relationship with our own body, end quote. So we need to be very careful about how we view our bodies. Nowadays, what we see in advertising, on social media and so forth, there's software available to alter the body so that you can have a body that is impossible to even have in real life, even with surgery. And it's not identified as that. So there are plenty of videos, images, advertising, and so forth that show just incredibly happy people that have incredibly impossible bodies. So here are some problems that he talks about, which I've begun to touch on. The first of all, this leads to cosmetic surgery uh, uh, to have a better body when you're young and when you're older, hiding old age. And this can be the case for men too. Men do a lot of things to try to keep hair growing up there. Um, that when you idolize looking thin, this can lead to anorexia, and people die from this. The Karmapa mentioned a French model in the book. Came to mind with me was Karen Carpenter, the singer, that she died from anorexia. And again, excessive focusing on one's body can lead to, let's say, spending a lot more time at the gym than is necessary so that you can, if you're a man, have great muscles and so forth. And for women, so that they have a better body. Tanning, he brings up tanning. It's amazing. If you're white, you've got to be tan, and if you're black, you're too tan. And that Karmapa mentions skin tone lighteners. In India, it's very desirable to have lighter skin, and they sell a lot of skin lighteners in India. And so there's all kinds of other problems that can result from this too. But basically, it is looking at your body and thinking that it is not good enough. There's something fundamentally wrong with my body. And it doesn't match the gender ideals that we have internalized, these fabricated gender ideals that we have fabricated. So he says that we have to find our values from within. That what sustains us is our virtuous thoughts and our noble heart. And virtuous thoughts are aspirations. When we practice, we do aspiration prayers. When we are done practicing and done with this talk, we'll dedicate the merit so that all beings can benefit from this. These are virtuous thoughts, and it's good to keep this in mind and continually making these virtuous aspirations and dedicating the merit to benefit all beings. It's also important to realize that we have Buddha nature inside, that we have primordial wisdom, and that we are not fundamentally bad. And he even uses the word beautiful thoughts. And if you have beautiful thoughts and aspirations, then you have beautiful parts, quote unquote. Here on page 51, he says, if you ground yourself in your own goodness, nothing will be able to damage your self-esteem. Take delight in your inner nature, your inner virtues, in all of your beautiful qualities, regardless of whether they are labeled masculine or feminine. This, I think, is a good way to sum up where he is going with his teaching on gender identities. So very simply, drop unrealistic expectations about yourself. And I am going to include in that not only about your body, but also about any of your actions. He talks about if you think you have unrealistic expectations about yourself, they told me I'm the Karmapa and the Karmapa is Buddha. And sometimes things go wrong for me. Sometimes I don't do things the way that I wish I would have done them. So we need to distinguish between realistic expectations for ourselves and unrealistic expectations for ourselves. Personally, this is my own anecdotal evidence, but I think many people that I come in contact with as both a Buddhist teacher and a friend, if they would rate themselves on a scale of 10, 1 to 10, 10 being, let's say, Buddha, number 1 being Adolf Hitler, they would rate themselves somewhere around a 2, that they just do not have unrealistic expectations of themselves. They expect themselves to be very bad and having done nothing but bad things throughout their entire life and constantly screwing up. And we need to realize that we have Buddha nature, we have this primordial goodness, to put it in another word, and that we can always make aspirations to do better when we make mistakes. With that, I would like to open it up to a question and answer. The question is that, well, how do I loosen up my gender identity? And when I was preparing this talk, of course, I saw a lot of myself in this. And so it's a very good question. How can you loosen up your gender identity? And again, it's a little difficult for me to talk as a man about what a woman can do. I'm afraid I don't want to go down to the quote mansplaining road, but uh, I'll first of all talk about myself, and that is not being so concerned about being masculine, being strong, being able to accomplish things. And I see that in myself. Um, and being more willing to shed a tear, to cry, to feel sad, the suffering of other people. You know, not about myself, but what I see in the world. Um, so for a woman, I guess, and again, I, this is just me, and it could be easily debatable, but maybe not so concerned about your appearance, um, not so concerned about clothing. And I'm not saying that the person that asked this question is concerned about their appearance and their clothing. Uh, but in general, a lot of women are. And I was married for 21 years, and this was long before I was involved in Buddhism. But I remember I was not the least bit concerned about clothing. And well, my wife was not overly concerned about clothing and makeup and so on and so forth, that when we would be going out somewhere on, like say, Saturday night together, uh, I was ready like that. And she, of course, had to put the makeup on and do the hair and on and on and on. And then she would see me and sometimes get this strange look on her face and say, "Are you going to wear that?" Uh, um, you know, this is one of the difficulties of being a man. But now it's a lot easier for me because I just wear my robes. And if someone says, "Are you wearing that?" Well, I'm a monk. But in all seriousness, um, I guess think about what you feel your identity is, how you present yourself, and then just question. First examine and then question, could I be a little different? Could I, whether it be dress a little different, have a different hairdo, have more of the natural look, or whatever. But it could be even at the office. If you're working in the office or at work, you know, do something different.